I want us to have some fun tonight. We're going to have fun, and we're going to have some really good tasting desserts that are easy to make, light and quick, and good for the summer. And I try to use seasonal ingredients. So zucchini's in season right now, so I'm making the zucchini bread with chocolate chips. And we've got some berries that are in season, so we're going to do some things with berries too. Hopefully you'll enjoy all these different things and be able to go home and reproduce them. Because I like to use foods that are anti-inflammatory. So the berries are anti-inflammatory, and those are good for fighting inflammation. And also the avocados and the green vegetables. And also, you know, avoiding like the dairy and the gluten a lot of times helps with inflammation too. That's the reason a lot of the times everything that I do make is gluten and dairy free. So, but there are a lot of good alternatives out there, and so you're going to learn a lot tonight. We're going to go ahead and get started with the chocolate chip zucchini bread. Now there's all different kinds of flours out there, and I used to, when I was making some gluten-free things, I used to use the gluten-free baking flour, which is okay and it tastes all right, but it's not as good as mixing up your own flours. So I found that if I have some different flours on hand and I mix them up, it has a better tasting product. The first thing we're going to use is brown rice flour, okay? And I use the Bob's Red Mill, and it calls for a ½ cup of brown rice flour. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in a bowl. We want to put our dry ingredients into a bowl. And the next thing is almond meal flour. Now almond meal flour, out of all the flours that are gluten-free, is the most expensive one. But you can shop around and sometimes you can find it at a better deal. But you don't use it that often and you don't use that much of it. So it's really it gives a really good flavor to the baked goods. And it calls for a ½ cup of almond flour. The almond meal flour works better than the regular almond flour for some reason. It's made from blanched almonds, whereas the regular almond flour has the peels on it, the brown peels on it. Now I'm all about the fiber, and that's the other thing. When you buy the already made gluten-free things or you buy the packaged gluten-free things, a lot of times they don't have a lot of fiber in them. So I like to add fiber to my baked goods. So I'm going to put some ground flax meal in here. And we're going to do a ½ cup of that. And you could also use chia seed too. That's good too. And you would just grind it up, and if you again in a coffee grinder, that works the best. The next thing it calls for is white rice flour, and I don't use a lot of white rice flour, but this recipe only takes a ½ cup. So we're going to put a ½ cup in there. So we're mixing all the dry ingredients into one bowl. And the next thing it calls for is a ½ cup of tapioca flour. You'll find that you use tapioca flour a lot when you're baking, as far as making gluten-free baked goods. Next it calls for xanthan gum. Now this xanthan gum you can buy in a bag like this, or you can get it in like a container. It kind of almost looks like a supplement container if you buy it at the health food store, so it just depends on where you get it. A lot of gluten-free baking calls for xanthan gum, so I always keep it on hand. It lasts quite a while. So it's calling for a ½ teaspoon.
Is that a red mill product also, like the flours, or not?
It is, Bob's Red Mill. Okay, then you want a teaspoon of baking soda. And I have that here somewhere. So we'll put that in there. And then it calls for a teaspoon of baking powder. ½ teaspoon of salt. Alrighty. Then it calls for a teaspoon of cinnamon. The cinnamon just gives it some really nice spice. And I have the organic cinnamon. And then it calls for a ½ teaspoon of nutmeg. Okay. Now we've got all these dry goods together. And what you want to do is get a spoon and just blend it together. So you just want to mix it up. Okay, now we're ready for the wet ingredients. Now, in the recipe here, you can use a ½ cup of organic butter or ghee or coconut oil. But I have another option, so you might want to write this down. And this is what I did for this zucchini bread here. A cup of coconut oil and a ½ cup of unsweetened applesauce. And all that does is just cut down some of the fat. You want to get organic extra virgin coconut oil when you use it. So we will put 1/4 of a cup of this into our mix here, into a clean bowl. Okay. Now, the next thing we need is our applesauce. This is organic natural applesauce. Now, when you buy applesauce or apples, you want to buy organic because apples are full of pesticides. There's certain fruits and vegetables that have more pesticides than others. So, and you want to buy the natural or unsweetened one. You don't need a lot of sugar in your applesauce. Also, this gives moistness to the baked good too. Now we want to put our sweetener in, and it calls for 1/2 cup, and we're going to use Locanto. Locanto, and I love it, it's a wonderful sweetener. It's made from the Chinese fruit lohan and also fermented erythritol. There's no calories and it's low glycemic. It is a little pricey, but it's well worth it because overall we don't want to use a lot of sweeteners. We only want to use sweeteners occasionally, like when we're baking or doing something like that. But it tastes absolutely wonderful, and there's no artificial ingredients in there. And so the latest news on agave nectar, which I still do use agave now and then, here and there, and I'll use a little bit tonight, but I've cut down on the amount of agave that I use because according to the latest research, it breaks down in your liver like alcohol and can contribute to fatty liver. So I have cut down on the agave that I use, and I use more of the Locanto. Xylitol is another sweetener you can use, or stevia. Those are all good sweeteners. This is my favorite. If you run this through a coffee grinder, you get an extra 1/2 cup. This is available on my website, or I do have it available here also. I just ordered another case because I go through it fairly fast. It's very good. Okay, so it calls for 1/2 cup. And I have already ground this in the coffee grinder so that it looks more powdery. Normally it looks granulated, but it'll look more powdery once you run it through. So we're going to add the sweetener. I need to add 1/2 cup of agave or maple syrup. So the other thing is natural maple syrup. Every once in a while you can use a little bit of that too. I don't have any regular granulated white sugar in my house. I have regular good maple syrup. I have the agave and the Locanto, and that's what or the stevia. But I will go ahead and add some of this maple syrup, but you could use the agave. The agave is low glycemic, so for somebody who is diabetic, for sure the agave would be a better choice, or for anybody who's not wanting their blood sugar to spike. And there's not going to be a lot of this in here, so it won't be a big deal overall. So we need 1/2 cup of this. Now you could do, if you wanted to, you could do a whole cup of the Locanto instead of splitting it up, but that's an awful lot of Locanto. And like I said, the Locanto is a little pricey, so a lot of times if it calls for a lot of sugar or sweetener, I will split it up like that. So I'm going to go ahead and blend this. Now you could use a mixer if you want to, or you can use a whisk. I like using a whisk rather than the blend or the mixer. Now, coconut oil is one of those things that if it's really hot out, it'll get liquidy. And then if it's not, it'll be like a semi-solid. But coconut oil has a lot of good properties to it. It's antibacterial, antifungal, and it breaks down in your body different than other saturated fats. So it breaks down and gives you energy rather than breaking down and getting stored as fat. So it's not the bad guy that it's, made out to be. Okay, the next thing we want to put in are 2 large eggs, and again, I go with organic eggs because whenever you go with dairy or meat or anything like that, you want to make sure you're going organic because most of the pesticides go in the fat of the meat or the dairy product. So, in the yolk, that's where the pesticides would be. So you want to make sure to go with organic. And if you don't use eggs, you can use egg replacer. That would be okay too. And another replacement for egg is the chia seed. You can actually make the chia into a gel and use that as an egg replacement. I didn't know if you knew that. Then you want to go with 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla. Now I'm lucky because I have some really good vanilla from Mexico. When you're looking for vanilla, look at the ingredients. You don't want the first ingredient to be alcohol. You want the first ingredient to be vanilla and alcohol to be way down the list. Okay. Now, we need to put our zucchini in. My granddaughter had fun shredding it up last night.
What did you use to shred it? Did you use?
I have a grater and I laid it across a bowl and did it that way. And I just made sure when it was a small chunk to put it aside, instead of trying to get every bit of it. Before I put the zucchini in though, I want to mix in the flour. So what you do is you slowly mix in some of the flour and just stir it as you're going along. Just mix it all together until it's blended. All right, now we will add the zucchini. So 2 cups of zucchini, shred it up. Now, I'm a chocolate person, so I'm going to put chocolate chips in here. You don't have to put the chocolate chips in. The ones that I'm using, they're little tiny mini chocolate chips, and they're actually called Enjoy Life. They're gluten-free, and they're dark chocolate. So I'm going to put in ½ a cup of dark chocolate chips. Now, everyone's oven is different. You want to cook this for between 55 and 65 minutes. With my oven, it took closer to 65 minutes. I was really surprised it took that long. And I'm talking about a loaf pan like this. Okay, so it says you want to grease the pan. Normally I would spray it, but I'm out of spray oil. So I have some coconut oil, and I'm just going to put some coconut oil in the pan. The nice thing about coconut oil is it's good for your skin. So when I'm done with this, I don't need to wipe it off my skin. I can actually use it as a moisturizer too. So I can put it on my hands and on my arms. There's no chemicals in it. If you want to scent it, you can put some essential oil in it. But it's absolutely wonderful for moisturizing. Okay, so you want to, it's not real coconutty smelling, surprisingly. You want to put this in the pan and then bake it for, like I said, 55 to 65 minutes. You want to stick a toothpick in it or a knife and make sure that it comes out clean. Okay, so there you have it. There's our zucchini bread, and over here is the finished product. We have some zucchini bread.